You are now tuned into Flipping the Birds, a Philly Sports Network podcast.
What's going on, Eagles fans? Welcome one, welcome all to another episode of Flipping the Birds.
He's into the end zone. Touchdown, Eagles.
What is going on, Eagles fans, and welcome to another episode of Flipping the Birds. I'm Corey Naito alongside David Neese. Unfortunately, Brian Cameron cannot make tonight's episode. Unfortunate, David, because it's going to be a big one. There is a lot to talk about here as the offseason for the Eagles starting much sooner than a lot of fans hoped, the team hoped, and that's just how the cookie crumbled, but maybe not unexpectedly, at least for you and I and those who cover the team, and obviously some fans knowing that this offense was going to be the biggest question mark if they could finally put together four quarters, and the answer to that was no, they couldn't, even with an extra week of rest for all the starters, as they fall 23-19 against San Francisco at home, ending the season and now opening up so many questions. We're going to talk about some of those questions here tonight, but you were at the game on Sunday inside Lincoln Financial Field. Just kind of tell our viewers the atmosphere throughout the game and then in the locker room.
Even when they were winning, like in the stands, there was trepidation the entire time. Like there was never like total elation. I think everybody was on pins and needles just waiting to see if they would do what you just said, be able to play four quarters. I don't think anybody went into the game, confident that that would happen. And when they were up 13-10 and then they had missed, I guess at that point, Jake had missed a field goal or an extra point. I can't remember which. Most people were, worried that the game would come down to a field goal that, Elliott wouldn't be able to do. And essentially they did lose by 4 points. The 4 points did matter, but and at the end of the game there, they could have kicked essentially a game-winning field goal had, Jake made the prior two kicks. But there was never like total elation. It was always trepidation. And then as the third and fourth quarter unfold, turned into anger. People yelling, screaming. There were fire Patullo chants in the fourth quarter before they'd even lost. So yeah, it was pretty ugly. And the locker room, like we discussed before the show, it was like a morgue. Like you said, it literally was like a morgue. Every time you go in there, there's hooting, hollering. Even in a loss, a regular season loss, there's not happiness, but there's still communication. There was nothing. It was literally one of the weirdest experiences to walk in there for 10 or 12 minutes in total silence. And nobody knew what to say. Nobody wanted to approach anybody. The guys who handle them were basically telling you to back off for the moment. So yeah, it was strange. So, at the end of the day, I guess the season shouldn't be remembered for how it ended. It should be remembered for what it squandered. And that they had a lot of opportunity. And I think that's the most depressing part of this, is they were one of the most complete teams, both on defense and offense in terms of talent. And they just squandered their opportunity.
No, I think that's a great way to put it there, where they squandered what they seemed to believe was another Super Bowl contending team. Now, that was the early thought process before they really started to play the games. First couple of weeks, we always hear, oh, it's early, and they're figuring things out. But once you hit week 7, week 8, when you hear A.J. Brown going public and saying, hey, this offense, you can't just flip a switch and hope that it clicks in the postseason, and that they have to stop relying on the defense, and it just never happened, where you hear the coaches saying, oh, there's things we got to fix. We're going to do everything we can to fix it. And then that following week, we saw the same mistakes, the same penalties, the same play calling, and it just became a frustrating season. And as you mentioned, I think just really a squandered opportunity for this dynasty window that Howie Roseman, Jeffrey Lurie, the Eagles players, and the fans are hoping that this can be. I mean, 2 trips to the Super Bowl in the last 3 years. You win one of them, you win a couple more here before the end of this decade, and you could be classified as a dynasty. So we'll see what happens here for the Eagles. We certainly don't want to beat a dead horse over that game. Obviously, some fans might still not be over it. I know my wife certainly isn't over it just yet. But Something that they are over, David, is the play calling of Kevin Patullo earlier this afternoon. The team announced that they will be removing Kevin Patullo from the offensive coordinator position. Now, when it first broke, Adam Schefter did tweet out that Kevin Patullo was fired, but then Mike Garafolo and some others confirmed with other sources that he, in fact, is not fired yet, and he does have a possibility to remain with the team in a different capacity. Just want to get your thoughts on the decision.
Yeah, I think that's the way to do it. I mean, a lot of fans don't like him, but he's pretty beloved inside the building. To a man, every single player at the end of that game stood up for KP. Every single one of them. And it's not just talk. I know you'll hear a lot of people say that that's what the players do. That's what a professional does. Take the bullet for him. It's not always like that. They genuinely care about him. I mean, they've been with him all 5 years. I mean, this isn't like they always, refer to him as, a first-time OC. That's true. It's the first time he's calling plays, but he's been with this team for 5 years. Right. He's very invested with them. The players, care about him. He cares about them. And it'll come down if he wants to take a demotion. That's really what it comes down to. As far as firing people, that choice of words, he definitely wasn't fired. I asked as many people as I could. I don't have anywhere near the contacts the ones you just mentioned do, but nobody verified that he was fired. In fact, the way that it was told to me was that they saved that for people like Chip Kelly, who really irritate the hell out of them. Like, he was fired. He didn't even get to finish the year. This is a guy who they care about, and he cares about the team. It's not 100% certain he wants to leave. I mean, he helped build this, like what you said, what could possibly be a dynasty. And he has a lot of roots to the area. His family, his children go to school there. He has a lot of ties to that area that, unless he gets overwhelmed with maybe a better offer, which, rumors have been out there that other teams are interested in him. There are 9 head coaching job openings. It's crazy. I'm not suggesting he gets a head coaching job, but somebody else might want him in some other capacity on one of those 9 teams. So there might be more opportunities for him, but it is open-ended just because they value what he brought to the team, what he helped build there, and they don't want to just kick him aside like, in the manner like they did Chip Kelly.
It's incredible. You mentioned how many coaching vacancies there are now. Over 25% of the league will have new head coaches, which is pretty remarkable. You mentioned the guys, they really like Kevin Patullo. He's beloved in the building. Saquon Barkley mentioned that. Jordan Mailata mentioned that it wasn't a Kevin Patullo issue. More so it was a lack of execution from the players. Saquon Barkley said, as media members, we understand you kind of need to point the finger at somebody. And he said that he believes that that's unfair to Kevin Patullo. Jordan Mailata was pretty emotional about it, saying, no, like, this is not Kevin Patullo. I know damn well that it's not. It was on us. But one of the bigger quotes, although it didn't have a lot of words, was what came out of the mouth of Jalen Hurts, where they asked him straight up, do you want Kevin Patullo back? And he simply said, it's too early to think about that right now. I trust Howie and Mr. Lurie with whatever decision they make. He didn't give I don't want to say backhanded compliment, but he didn't defend Kevin Patullo. He didn't say, hey, we've worked together for the last 5 years. Again, Jalen Hurts did take blame after the game, obviously, on Sunday. Maybe he thought he didn't have to reiterate that. But I thought it was a little telling that he didn't just go out in front of the media and stand up immediately for Kevin Patullo. So maybe that's because the dynamic between he and Jalen were different than the rest of the players. I'm unsure of that, but I just thought that was kind of eyebrow raising there.
No, it definitely is, because there is not anyone on that team who is more intentional with what they say than Jalen Hurts, and intentional in what he doesn't say. He is very much in control, and what he does is about his image. He knows exactly what he's doing or not doing at all times. I've never met an athlete who's been more in verse with that than Jalen Hurts.
Absolutely. So speaking of Jalen Hurts here, as we continue, we hope you're enjoying the show. Feel free to subscribe, drop a comment, let us know your thoughts on the Eagles right now and where you think they stand. Wanted to talk about Hurts a little bit, David, because he's such a polarizing topic in this city, in this region, and nationally. You've got the people that absolutely love Jalen Hurts. He can do no wrong. And then on the complete other side of the spectrum, you have the Jalen Hurts haters where he can't do anything right. But somewhere in the middle, Jalen Hurts falls as a quarterback. And this season, he struggled a bit, obviously, with the banged up offensive line. The wide receivers had some uncharacteristic drops throughout the season. The running game obviously wasn't there. But I do think Jalen Hurts does deserve some criticism on the way he played Sunday night and throughout the season. What I don't understand is these reports or the speculation that Jalen Hurts can't do X, Y, and Z. He can't throw over the middle. He doesn't want to run. But we've seen Jalen Hurts do all of those things. I mean, there have been plays where he fires a pass over the middle to a crossing A.J. Brown or a crossing Dallas Goedert. So my question to you, I guess, is if you peel back the layers of this onion, so to speak, what does Jalen Hurts need to do to improve on in terms of his own game with a new offensive coordinator moving forward?
Yeah, I mean, he's always going to be questioned about the offense as long as it's as remedial as it is, I guess. It's one way to put it. It's kind of basic, and I guess a lot of outsiders will view that he is unable to run, a more complex system. I don't think that's the truth. I mean, he's a coach's son. He's played in programs all over, and two in college that, have a lot of pro style techniques and play calling involved in that. I think what he has to do to finally shake that kind of outlook on him is he's going to have more autonomy in the huddle and at the line of scrimmage. He's going to have to start calling more plays himself. I was listening to somebody discuss it. I think it was Nick Foles.
Yep.
And he was talking about something about, I go to the coach, I got 8 plays that I love. And that's what Jalen needs to evolve to. He needs to start having that voice. I think part of the problem has been, this is what his 6th OC in 6 years that he's about to have. He doesn't have that kind of continuity, and maybe he hasn't earned the trust. Every year you're trying to prove yourself again to a different coordinator. And I think that's the difference. All of the elite quarterbacks that you see are able to do that right there at the line of scrimmage. A play call comes in, they get to the line, they realize that play is not going to work, and they have the autonomy to change it and do a beater on it. And he for whatever reason, I don't think they've ever, allowed that. And another thing that remained one of the most biggest mysteries was just, he's one of the more efficient runners at his position in the entire NFL. Yet his design runs nearly vanished from the playbook this year. And it wasn't preservation. And if so, it caused limitation, because Hurts's legs have always been the cheat code to stress defenses. And if you take that element away and it didn't protect them, it boxed them in. And it constricted their offense, and it kept it from ever being able to spread its wings. And I think that was one of the biggest downfalls of this season, was it didn't allow Saquon to go. It didn't allow, Hurts to get into a rhythm early. And I think that's what the next evolution has to be, is just his having the ability to call plays, make his own play calls up there, and just have a stronger voice in the room there. I think he's earned it. He's been here 6-7 years now. It's time. You either trust him or you don't.
No, I agree. And I don't know the name of the podcast that Nick Foles was on, but just search it on Twitter, you're going to find it immediately. I thought Foles made a great point, and you alluded to that. The next step in the maturation process for Jalen Hurts is to be able to make these calls where he sees what the defense is giving him. He's like, nope, we're going to go to this and we're going to beat it that way. So one more final thing where it's more speculation regarding Jalen Hurts and Kevin Patullo, Nick Sirianni. But I don't know if you saw that video clip, David, where when they all huddled to call that final play of the season, the facial expressions from Jalen Hurts and Nick Sirianni and even Tanner McKee didn't look like the Philly special conversation we saw between Foles and Doug Peterson. Now, I'm not an expert lip reader. It was hard to see what Jalen was trying to say. It looked like Nick Sirianni kind of tilted his head like, all right, are you good with this call? And Hurts just kind of looked at Patullo and Sirianni like, yeah, I guess. Now, I don't think we'll ever find out exactly what went on in that conversation, but I just think that was a big difference from the confidence that we saw way back in 2017 with Doug Peterson and Nick Foles, and arguably the biggest turning point of that game in the Super Bowl, to trying to keep your season alive in a wild card round on 4th and 11.
Right. No, that's a great point you make, and that kind of what Nick was discussing, and that is what needs to happen. He's got to step up and have the voice there. And we might not know, how he felt about it or what was said in that conversation, but we know it was called. It was 4 verticals, straight down the field
against cover 4.
Yeah, and yeah, it was the bad play call. And again, it's hard to put everything on Patullo because there are a lot of reasons for that. The scheme itself, poor execution of the play, but everybody knows what the Eagles are doing, and they had so much repetition in this game where it was just the same call over and over, and it just seemed like a lot of people were out of their element this year and doing things. I mean, even in the press conference when Patullo was like, "Oh, we ran just to run." I mean, even if that's really not what he meant, it's just a terrible look. I mean, you're not going to survive that in this city, and yeah, it's just not good. Just
no, not at all.
Again,
Again,
not good.
Again, if you're just tuning in and you missed the news, Kevin Patullo was removed from his duties as offensive coordinator. He technically was not fired by the team. We'll see if he gets demoted back to his original position, or maybe they create a new one for him to keep him on staff. But what this show really is about today, David, is who will be calling the plays for the 2026 Eagles. You mentioned it's a new offensive coordinator. Again, I believe the 5th different one now in 6 years now under Nick Sirianni, and for Jalen Hurts. Obviously, the list goes even longer for Hurts back to his college days with transferring and the rotating offensive coordinators he's dealt with at the college level. So this is nothing new for Jalen Hurts. But with that said, there are a ton of candidates out there for the Eagles to choose from. And maybe if you're looking for a silver lining with this first round exit, is that the Eagles now are in the mix with the rest of these teams vying for one of the top candidates, where when we talked about it on this podcast a lot, when you go and win the Super Bowl, you are now behind the 8 ball in that process. Now, yes, you would trade a Super Bowl for first dibs on an offensive coordinator every day of the week, but if you're looking for some positives here, this is still a Super Bowl contending roster. Obviously, it will look a bit different with all the free agents they have. But for the offensive coordinating position, David, I know you're writing a piece on 5 possible candidates. I'm writing one as well. Maybe bounce back a couple of different candidates and why. But I'll start with you. Who is your 1A guy that you want to see the Eagles land?
I think the one that makes the most sense is Brian Daboll. I just think, his familiarity with Hurts, obviously, but his stint with the Giants may have kind of muddied his resume for some in a way, but the offenses that he's ran in the past, including that Alabama, matter. I mean, you throw in his history with Jalen, like I mentioned, and this pairing just kind of makes sense. You put him back in an OC only role, and you'll see a different guy than you saw as head coach. He was very aggressive play caller when he was, just as an OC. But something disappeared with all of that as a coach. But I think Daboll will probably also be one of the more popular predictions just because of his connection to Jalen. But I also think it makes a lot of sense. I'd be happy with that. I think long term, though, the problem that you have, and you mentioned you would trade Super Bowls for having to find dart throws at OC every 2 years. But the problem you have with the way this Eagles team is structured with the CEO type coach is that this is a rinse and repeat every 2 years. If Daboll comes back here, it might not be 1 year because maybe, like I said, he kind of muddied his resume a little bit there with New York. But within 2 years, if he succeeds, he's getting another shot. And as we go through the names, that's where the problems come, because a lot of defensive coordinators don't get that many head coaching opportunities, but OCs do every single year, like 75% of the job opportunity. So like I said, it just ends up being like a rinse and repeat. But it's the structure that they currently have. They're definitely not moving on from Sirianni this year. So that's what we're confined to choose, I guess, as you go through here, is offensive coordinators who are willing to come to a loaded team for one season to basically build their resume so they can, try to take the next step forward to be a head coach.
Yeah, I mean, it's happened before. Obviously, Kellen Moore used it as a springboard 1 year, and he was out. Shane Steichen, obviously, he was there, and he was also a head coach. So
Frank Reich years ago,
yep,
actually.
Frank Reich, yep, absolutely. So that, and that's the way the NFL is formed and kind of guiding these offensive coordinators now, as you mentioned. I think Dable is an interesting candidate because of his days in Alabama, as you mentioned, with Jalen Hurts. You mentioned that Dable muddied his resume a little bit with the Giants. While I do agree, I also think the front office did him any favors.
No.
Obviously you don't get Saquon Barkley back, so now you're trying to replace an all-pro running back. The talent just isn't really there. They play on the worst turf in the world. You lose your star wide receiver because you won't change the turf on the field. So I do think Dable could be a solid pick. My only concern with him would be the personality clash between he and Sirianni potentially. Those are two extremely fiery people, but I do think that Dable could be a nice fix here for the Eagles. And as you mentioned, maybe it's a 2-year, maybe even 3 years, depending on what Dable's looking for. But I would imagine he'd want to get back into the head coaching realm. But yeah, I do think that makes a lot of sense. One of my top candidates would be Todd Monken, the former offensive coordinator from the Baltimore Ravens. He also has some ties not to Jalen Hurts, but to all the Georgia Bulldogs on the defensive side of the football for the Eagles. Obviously, he's not going to be calling defense, but he helped lead Georgia to back-to-back national championships just a few years ago. In his first season with the Ravens, Lamar Jackson had one of his best seasons, leading the Ravens to a 13-4 record. That was the best record in the AFC. And obviously, Lamar Jackson, a dual threat quarterback, I would say he's probably a bit more accurate than Jalen Hurts with his arm at times. But I think why I like Monken the most is because he is on the older side, and perhaps he doesn't have those aspirations to be a head coach, where he can say, hey, I'm going to plant my flag here in Philadelphia for the next 5 seasons. And that would give Jalen Hurts continuity almost up until, I don't want to say the end of his career, but through his peak of his career, without a doubt. And then you see what happens from there. But I do think Monken could be an interesting choice where he really had great success with Lamar Jackson. And he had great success with the Ravens with a little bit of a lesser supporting cast. I think Saquon Barkley and Derrick Henry, you could flip-flop on any given year, but you compare the wide receivers and Zay Flowers and Rashad Bateman or whoever they have to A.J. Brown and Devontae Smith. I mean, that's a clear advantage to Philly. Mark Andrews was a fantastic tight end, kind of has fallen off a little bit as he gets older, but I do think Monken would be a safe floor pick, if you will, because I think he would want to stick around if things go well. I mean, if this completely flips on its underbelly here, then all bets are off. But I do think that going for a more conservative choice in terms of not wanting to get that next level, not wanting to get that generational wealth that you get when you become a head coach could be certainly appealing for the Eagles.
Yeah, I agree. He and Daboll are probably my 1A and 1AA. I mean, if I had to choose, Monken would be my pick. I think for everything you just said, he does have a high floor. I do think the dream is to try to get somebody here to roll with Fangio for 4 or 5 years and let Nick do what he does, which is valuable. I know a lot of people don't see it, but what he does is valuable. But yeah, those are the two. Are we going to name a couple more?
Yeah, we'll do one more each. Why not?
All right. If I could just throw a couple more, I'll say one that will not be as an exciting of a hire, but I'll go with Mike Kafka. The reason is there's a lot of familiarity there. Kafka has lived inside elite quarterback rooms. He understands how modern offenses function, and as a bridge between Andy Reid principles, which he knows very well, and today's NFL's concepts, it just feels like a clean, logical fit. I'm sure he'll be getting some offers. And also the Commanders, who I don't even think they released him. I think he just left. Cliff Kingsbury. at times polarizing without a doubt, but his ability to develop a quarterback is the real deal. I mean, look no further than Jaden Daniels' rookie season. It was unbelievable. That type of progress and production didn't happen by accident. With the right structure and a strong head coach and a good roster, which the Eagles provide, Kingsbury offense can be, uber productive. I think, that's pretty exciting as well. But again, there's so many names here. It's exciting that they can throw their, hat in the ring here this time for some guys, because I know a lot of people push back. They could have hired this person, this person. It just doesn't work like that. When you're already behind the 8 ball in mid-February, continuity matters probably a lot more inside the building than trying to throw a dart at, finding the newest OC who hasn't done it before. It's just not easy. And finding these type of experienced guys, if they want to stay at the top, this is the year they got to nail one. Because like you said, the dream is to get one of these guys in here 3 to 5 years. Because if you just keep rotating them every year after success, it's just a vicious cycle. And it would be the most appealing is to get somebody in here who actually wants to come along for the ride and just doesn't have the aspirations to leave 12 months later.
No, I agree. I agree with both of those. I think what's key for the Eagles is they have to avoid a first-year play caller. Now, I know there's some young names that are floating about, especially coming from the Rams staff, that are generating some buzz. Two guys that I would also include on this list. This first one I don't think is really likely at all. I do think he's going to land another head coaching job, and that's Kevin Stefanski. This is a Philadelphia native. He's only 43, went to St. Joe's Prep, went to University of Penn. He was a defensive back for the Quakers, then started out as a director of football operations, or assistant, and then really just took off with the Vikings, climbing their coaching ladder before being the Cleveland Browns head coach for the last 5 seasons. And you might say, well, Stefanski, he never won anything. The Browns aren't known for their offense. Well, similar to Brian Daboll, Kevin Stefanski hasn't really had the best situation over in Cleveland. I mean, if you're a head coach, you kind of go there because you know you're going to get paid, but you also know that your shelf life is not going to be very long at all. So maybe Stefanski sees this as a chance to come back home. He sees this as a chance to right the ship of what should be a really high explosive offense. And, from what I've heard from other reports, the Eagles are pretty high on Stefanski. He is an offensive-minded coach, and I think that would be a really cool get and a good get for the Eagles, a cool story of bringing home a local guy. But Stefanski is one of them as well for me. And then I'm kind of torn between a few others. I do think that there are some solid choices, but you mentioned Mike McDaniel, Kafka, Kingsbury, those are on the radar as well. I don't think I want like a Mike McCarthy. Like I just don't want that. I don't think that would be a good situation. I don't think they're gonna go this way, but as I did mention, there was the one Rams pass game coordinator, Nate Scheelhaus, his name is. He's starting to get a lot of traction. Sean McVay recently said that this guy is going to be a head coach sooner than later. We know what this Rams passing offense looks like, right? I mean, you got Matt Stafford, Puka Nacua, Devontae Adams, kind of a similar Eagle build up there where you got A.J. Brown and Devontae Smith. And, maybe he impresses the Eagles, although he hasn't called any plays. And I believe he's only like 30, 31 years old. So, I mean, this is a really young buck that is trying to make a name for himself. I don't think that's the direction they're going, but that could be a kind of an X factor or a dark horse, if you will, if the Eagles opt to go for somebody younger that has a bit of a more youthful look at the game. Continuing on here on Flipping the Birds, we always appreciate you tuning in. Again, please subscribe, drop a like on the channel, tell your friends, tell your family about it. We'll be talking birds all off season long. Again, unfortunately, an off season that has started sooner than later. He's David Neese. I'm Corey Naito. Going to move along here, David. We talked about some of the offensive coordinators. We talked about what Jalen Hurts needs to do to improve his quarterback play. One of the stories of that game on Sunday, of course, was A.J. Brown's performance. And then obviously he did not talk to the media after the game. He also did not talk to the media during locker cleanout day. Now, some people aren't too concerned about A.J. Brown not speaking to the media. He hasn't really talked to reporters in the last month or so. So it's not really anything new, although I personally thought he should have at least faced the music, even if it was just for a couple of questions, tell the PR team, hey, I'm going to answer 2-3 questions tops and I'm out. But he opted not to do that. And I understand why, right? Because there's times where A.J. Brown says something and it gets twisted. It gets all bent out of shape from the media and the fans. And it gets just the context just completely evaporates with what he's saying. And I put a tweet out, and I believe you put a tweet out that these fans that are going viral and saying, oh, I want A.J. Brown out of the city, get A.J. Brown off my team because he had a bad game. And, he had some poor efforts throughout the season. What do you think this offense is going to look like without A.J. Brown? If they somehow decide to trade him, which seems to be impossible anyway, looking at his contract and what the cap hits would be. Plus, the value is not going to be there. But just want to get your thoughts on that. I mean, I'm on the firm side of you do not trade A.J. Brown because he had one bad year where I don't want to say he checked out, but he told everybody what was happening 2 months ago, where he said we can't rely on a switch to just flip in the playoffs and think that we're going to just start humming again. Like, that's not how this works. So just want to get your opinion on that.
Yeah, I mean, it would be a totally different offense. I mean, the impact that he made when he came to the Eagles in 2022, you went all the way to the Super Bowl with the guy. And him and Devontae Smith are one of the best 1-2 punches in the league. If you remove that, a lot of people will say, Smitty can just be the new number one, but there's got to be an elite player across the field from him for him to succeed like that. Because A.J. Brown's not just a number one receiver. He's also a tone setter. I mean, when he's on the field, defenses tilt coverage his way. Safeties widen, boxes lighten. Suddenly the run game is easier. Devontae Smith sees far easier looks because coverage is rolling to AJ. And, a lot of that doesn't show up in the box scores, but it shows up every Sunday when you watch the All 22. He's exactly what you want paired with Jalen Hurts. He's a fearless guy, dominant after the catch, unfazed by tight windows. And, he had a rough time this year. There's no doubt about it. And the 2 or 3 drops in the wild card game will, be the lasting memory of a lot of people until he gets back on the field. But when things break down, Brown's usually been the answer. I mean, he's normally the guy who's stepped up. And a lot of people joke during the season, oh, they started getting targets and they lost 3 games in a row. Yeah, well, that's really not what happened. What happened was he got the targets early in the game, and they did what they've done for much of the season and kind of went back into their shell and didn't keep their foot on the pedal in these games. I think he's the standard. He plays hard. He practices hard. You've been in the locker room. Everybody in there loves him. He's a beloved member of the team. As you mentioned, he did try to alert everybody to what was going on. You might not have liked the way he did it, but that doesn't make the message less relevant. I think it was very on point. A lot of people thought it was always, pointed at Jalen Hurts. I don't really look at it that way. I think it was the offense in general. And there may be some aspect of it was towards him because he wanted him to have his back more and just kind of override decisions, I guess, to try to get him more targets. But it would be a vastly different offense without him. And you'd be talking about having to start investing first-round pick in a wide receiver again, which is probably on their list, not as a first round maybe, but wide receiver is very high on their list.
Yeah, I mean, you look at the roster right now. We're going to talk about some of the free agents to wrap this episode up in just a moment. And I love Devontae Smith. Before we get to the wide receiver edition, everybody's like, oh, not everybody, but there are some fans out there. Oh, Devontae Smith could be wide receiver 1. Can he? Like, I love watching Smitty play, but the reason why Devontae Smith also has success is because who's lining up opposite of him in A.J. Brown. Because defenses have to focus on A.J. Brown and Devontae Smith. Right now, if you trade A.J. Brown, again, highly unlikely, I think, although you hear the talking heads on radio, you see people on social media saying, no, this is definitely going to happen. I don't see how it's going to happen even after the post-June 1st date. I mean, there's still a cap hit. I believe maybe they could save like $6-7 million, but you're not going to get what you want from this trade. So with that said, you move him. Okay, you got Devontae Smith, and then Darius Cooper is your number 2 wide receiver right now with no other moves. They are not bringing back Jahan Dotson, more than likely. Dotson hasn't done anything in the 2 seasons he's been here. Really, the wide receiver 3 isn't a functioning role in this offense because of Brown, Smith, Goddard, Barkley. But again, you are decimating your offense in a sense. And then also in turn, does that make the OC position less attractive? I would say yes. Now, they're not going to wait until June to hire an OC, but you hire an OC in the next 2-3 weeks, and all of a sudden we're like, oh, yeah, by the way, you're not going to have A.J. Brown. I think that might rub the new OC the wrong way a little bit.
Yeah, they already know what they're doing with him. And if he's not there, it's more fractured than any of us realize. But you bring up a great point. Like Dotson in the locker room, he basically was telling everybody goodbye. Like, I enjoyed my 2 years here. It was fun. I learned a lot, but see you,
Right.
They already declined his option. I mean, it's kind of written that the only way he'd be back, obviously, is if something was cooking with A.J. Brown. But it leads to one other thing. Everybody criticized Patullo, but where do you stand with Aaron Moorhead? He kind of went under the radar here, but the lack of the development of the wide receivers, Johnny Wilson, Aeneas Smith, Dotson himself, it's a little concerning. He's kind of gone under the radar and really hasn't taken the ire of the fans' anger. But, even some have said AJ regressed this year. So I think it's fair to wonder if he's going to be back as well. But you mentioned Darius Cooper. He'll be great as a wide receiver 3. I loved him in college. I love his potential. He's been, injured a lot this season. But as a number 2 opposite Devontae Smith, you better hope Saquon Barkley can run for 2,005 yards again, because the passing game would be abysmal.
Right, and that's no slight on Devontae Smith. Like I said,
not at all.
I say pound for pound, he might be one of the best wide receivers in the league.
Doubt.
He's beyond gritty. He's underrated. I think we should be seeing a lot more number 6 jerseys inside the link every Sunday. But it helps when you've got a guy like A.J. Brown playing opposite of you. Just like it also helps A.J. Brown when you got Devontae Smith playing it opposite of him.
Yeah.
So just
if you don't have
interesting
another
point.
option and he's doubled every play, you're in big trouble.
Yep, exactly. So just some food for thought there. Again, I know frustrations were running high on Sunday, and people are kind of fed up with AJ's antics publicly over the last 2 seasons. But at the same time, this is kind of what you get with star wide receivers, right? I mean, they want the ball. And if you're a fan, and if you're the Eagles, you want A.J. Brown to be involved. He's getting paid too much money to not get the ball 8 to 10 times a game. I mean, that's just the fact of the matter here. Like, he's making $30-some million a year, and you can't scheme him open. Meanwhile, DeMarcus Robinson goes for 111 yards and a touchdown on Sunday against his Eagles secondary. So there's definitely something there. You make a great point with Aaron Moorhead. I also think another coach that hasn't gotten a lot of heat, and obviously it's tough when you got injuries, but Jeff Stoutland, I think, deserves some of the blame too a little bit. Obviously, nobody wants to talk bad about this offensive line, right? Everybody loves them. They're more than accommodating, usually in the locker room and in the media. But this offensive line struggled. There was no doubt about it. I know the injuries hurt, so I don't think it's as concerning, but I do think Stoutland also has been getting a little bit of a pass here this season. We're almost done with this episode. We got a couple more topics to talk about here. As always, we appreciate you tuning in to Flipping the Birds. Again, make sure you subscribe to the channel and drop a like. It will certainly help myself, Brian, and David out. Again, Brian, unfortunately, unable to make today's show, but it's usually the 3 of us. And we're working on some new ideas here for the new channel. We're going to brainstorm, maybe try and get some guests on as we get this thing rolling here. But David, obviously the offseason is underway. The list of things the Eagles have to address is the equivalent to a CVS receipt. I mean, it goes on and on and on. Just kind of want to do a little spitball here back and forth with you on some free agents and some other players that aren't free agents, but maybe their time has come to an end here in Philadelphia. We'll start with the free agents. Jalen Phillips, do you think he is back or do you think he's gone?
I do think they're going to try to keep him. I don't know if they'll be able to reach his number. He mentioned in the locker room that he's going to do best for his family, which means I want a lot of money.
Right.
So I think they're going to try, though. I do believe that they think he's a difference maker. You take him out of that rotation, it was nowhere near as productive. I mean, from the moment he got here to the end of the season, the pressures, the sacks, everything increased, twofold. So it would be a pretty big blow. And I know a lot of people are going to say you can't pay everybody. Nolan Smith is going to be up for a contract. Jalen Tunn will be up for a contract. Yeah, that's 2 years down the road, man. You worry about 2 years down the road. And if anybody knows how to manipulate a budget, it's Howie Roseman.
I agree. I do think they will try to sign him, as you mentioned. He's expecting a child with his partner. Obviously, that is certainly something that he has to account for. But he did say he loved the guys in the locker room. He loves the organization, and he certainly has made it known he wants to be back. But as you mentioned, it's a matter if the Eagles can meet his price point. Speaking of somebody that really made an impact in the defensive side of the ball, it was Nakobe Dean when he came back from his injury. Do you think he will be back next season?
Yeah, I actually spoke to him about this. I think he thinks he's going to be back. I think some of it will be dictated. We keep going back to money, but I do think some of it will be dictated by how risk averse the other 31 teams in the NFL are about his injury history. He might not get the contract that he thought he might get. There's a lot of free agent linebackers. It's a really good draft class for linebackers. I think both of that kind of hurt his market a little bit. So maybe the Eagles can get him, even if it's a one-year prove-it deal, kind of like what they did with Goddard this year. Just a way to keep him in the building. He is a difference maker. Jahad Campbell doesn't bring the same skill set that Nakobe Dean does. They play, two very different roles. So they play well together actually, but I'd be surprised if they don't at least give him a competitive offer to try to tempt him to stay. And aspect of it that isn't mentioned as much is he is the glue that holds all those Georgia dogs together in that locker room. Every single one of them, Jalen Carter, Aeneas Smith, you can go through the list, Keely Ringo, they all look up to him like he's their guy, like he's their captain. And I think that matters. I think it's a big role to keep on the team. I think, a lot of people were worried about Jalen Carter and, anything personality issues that he could have had that could conflicted with other organizations. I mean, the Bears admitted that's why they did the trade with Philadelphia. They didn't think their locker room had enough leaders to handle that kind of personality. And I think Nakobe Dean answers a lot of those questions for you. They're very, very close. They don't see themselves as teammates or friends. They're like brothers. So I think that plays a larger role than a lot of people think. I know most believe he's gone, but I wouldn't be so sure about that.
No, you make a great point about the culture and the tightness there with the Georgia Bulldogs in the locker room. I do find myself in the majority of believing he won't be back. And I know you mentioned Jahad Campbell plays a different role, but he did fill in for Dean when he was out to start the season. And Campbell was an early front runner for Defensive Rookie of the Year in that first month. And then when Dean came back in early October, Campbell just completely took a back seat. And I don't know if Howie Roseman, Jeffrey Lurie, and this Eagles team wants Campbell to be sitting any longer. I think they want him to be a bigger playmaker and take a bigger step in his second season as a pro. So with that said, I do agree that it's a great point you make, and I do believe they will try and give him an offer, and it depends on what the rest of the league values him at, but I am leaning that he won't be back, which is tough. I really enjoyed talking to Nakobe Dean. I thought he brought a physicality to this defense that was actually missing through the first 4 or 5 weeks before he got back. But I do think because of Campbell kind of waiting in the wings, although a little bit of a different type of player, I think that kind of makes that decision a little tougher.
In addition to Jahad Campbell, I think what they believe Jeremiah Trotter Jr. could be plays a role in that decision as well, because he plays that role more like Nakobe.
Yep. Yeah, and he looked great against the Washington Commanders in that final game. Had 12 tackles to Trotter Jr. So it'd be interesting, and quite frankly, it would be nice to see Trotter Jr. kind of get more of a runway here moving forward. Got 2 more for you, David, as we're getting closer to wrapping this up. Appreciate everybody tuning in. We've got Dallas Goedert, which I think was one of the more interesting stories this season, right? I mean, this is a guy who was possibly not going to be even on this roster in the summer because his camp and the Eagles couldn't agree on a contract deal. And then they finally cobbled something together, a 1-year, $10 million deal. And then Dallas Goedert turns out to be perhaps the best offensive weapon the Eagles had this year, set a franchise record for receiving touchdowns by a tight end, scored 2 touchdowns in Sunday's loss. He's a veteran tight end, a career year of all years. This is a great year for him personally because he can go and fetch a bigger contract perhaps. He is injury prone, obviously. He has missed a good chunk of time in his career with the Eagles, but the Eagles don't have a tight end on the roster right now as it stands. Grant Calcaterra and Kylan Granson are both free agents, and those 2 are just not at the same pedigree of Dallas Goedert. Does the tight end come back for yet another season?
It's funny how players stay healthier and produce their best on these 1-year deals, isn't it?
Yeah.
But I don't know. They're in a quandary with that. I thought they should have prioritized drafting a tight end high in this previous draft to protect them from this very scenario.
There were some good ones too.
There were. And there's some in this draft, but, relying on a rookie tight end on a team that's, aspires to win a Super Bowl, like you mentioned, they're in a, really favorable window now. I don't know, because you got a tight end who scored 11 touchdowns this season. He's going to get a multi-year deal. There's going to be an offer, and I don't know if the Eagles want to go that far with him. I think they thought it was a mistake how they did it in the past by going to certain ages with players. And I think that it'll be a hard choice to probably have to just let him go. If there's one thing they could hang their hat on is, as far as the offense goes, if they're going to try to go back to being a more dominant run game, that is where Goddard struggled this year. He was nowhere near the run blocker like he was in the past. Mm-hmm. Some of that could have been out of necessity because they needed a pass catcher. He did, like we mentioned, put up the 11 touchdowns. But I think if you're going to try to lower his value in your mind, that's what you're going to hang your hat on, that he's declining as far as physical strength and his ability to succeed as a run blocker. So I would be a little surprised just because I don't think, they're going to want to go 3 years with him.
Yeah, and I think what's going to come down to is the price that Dallas Goedert is looking for, and the years, as you mentioned, trying to pull up the free agency class here for the tight ends. You've got like a Cade Otton, maybe a Chig Okonkwo of Tennessee, who has flashed here and there.
He's at the top, though.
I'm sorry.
He's at the top.
Yeah. So they're obviously not going for Travis Kelce, and who knows if Kelce is going to hang it up. So I don't know the landscape of this tight end free agency class, if it behooves them to move on from Goddard, but it's certainly going to be an interesting storyline to follow here throughout the offseason. One more free agent I want to talk about before we get into some non-free agents as we continue on here. Reed Blankenship. I think is kind of an interesting player here. He was a great story, found his way into a starting role as an undrafted free agent out of Middle Tennessee State, able to just kind of carve a nice role for this Eagles team back there at safety. He seemed pretty emotional. I don't know if you were able to talk to him Sunday, but obviously him and Cooper DeJean have a fantastic brotherhood going. They've got the podcast, the exciting mics. Everybody loves the exciting whites. It's just been a really fun thing for the fans to kind of just cling on to. But I don't know if Reed is back next season.
Yeah, I think Cooper was more emotional about him not being there than Reed was.
Yep.
No, I don't think he'll be back. I mean, again, we sound like a broken record. It'll come down to money, but somebody will probably pay Reed more than they want to, and they can fill that role pretty cheaply. I know a lot of people saw Howie kind of stray away from his philosophy in this last draft by taking a linebacker in round one and a safety in round two. But I think you'll see a shift back to his focus on premium positions in the draft and in free agency. I don't think this will be a high priority. If he gets a contract worth anywhere near what a lot of the projections are, I don't think he'll be back.
And you look ahead, you assume that Andrew Makuba will be back. He kind of gave an update during the locker cleanout day that he's hoping to get his walking boot off in the near future. And then maybe they re-sign Marcus Epps on the cheap. I mean, I thought Epps did a solid job as the second safety in lieu of Makuba, and maybe they go that way. So I agree. I don't think that is extremely high on their priority list, but definitely something to keep an eye out for.
I mean, they found him as a UDFA. So,
Yep.
I mean, yeah, I'd be shocked.
Last one before we close this one out. Jake Elliott. Obviously, people were really mad that he missed the extra point. Some people may have even placed the blame as to why they lost this game because it seemed like the Eagles were chasing that point. If he made it, the Eagles only needed a field goal instead of a touchdown to at least force overtime. And they were pretty close into Jake Elliott's field goal range. They may even have been in Elliott's range at that point. But he's had a wonderful career. For whatever reason, he struggles with extra points in the playoffs, David, but he is almost automatic in field goals. He's only missed one career playoff field goal. But do you think Jake Elliott's time with the Eagles has come to an end?
I don't remember his contract, but I know it's not favorable for the Eagles. But I kind of do. I mean, Jeffrey Lurie loves the offense. You know, he don't have his hand involved much on the defense, but he loves the quarterback position. He loves scoring points, and he loves explosive plays. And when you look around the league and you see all of these kickers who have the ability to kick it 60, 65 yards with regularity, which is something he cannot do, I do think that they want a bigger weapon. I do think they want somebody who's more reliable to kick, further field goals, quite frankly. It's an aspect of the team that's missing. And when you look, especially when your rival has the best kicker in the league in Dallas, who's booting 70-yard field goals over there, I do think it's something that they'll look into trying to upgrade.
Yeah, you're looking at what Elliott is due next season, $1.3 million as a base salary, signing bonus of $4.6 million, and then a $50,000 workout bonus. But I think you make a great point there. I mean, with the new kicking balls in the NFL, Cam Little of Jacksonville is booting 68-yarders like it's nothing. It kind of takes away a weapon that the Eagles offense could utilize if they get back on track offensively and you stall at midfield, or if you stall at the 40-yard line, where with Jake Elliott right now over the last two seasons, he has not been nearly as good from 50-plus yards out. So I'm with you there. I do think Elliott might be no longer with the team, and they'll try and figure a way to move him, or the cap hit, looking at it, looks like it would be about $4.8 million. So that's
which is high for a kicker.
I was going to say it's kind of hefty for a kicker.
Yeah.
So we'll see what they do. Again, another great story. They poached him off the Cincinnati Bengals practice squad way back when, and he has thrusted himself into the conversation of the best kicker of all time alongside David Akers. So that will do it for our show here tonight. We thank you so much for tuning in. We've got plenty to discuss on a weekly basis here on Flipping the Birds. It's going to be a long off season, but I think it could be, I don't want to say fun, David, but definitely entertaining in a sense of where they go with the offensive coordinator and how they handle some of these roster decisions moving forward. So thanks so much for tuning in here tonight. As always, we appreciate the viewership. Again, please subscribe, drop a like, drop a comment either during the live stream or even afterwards, and we will try and hit them on our next episode. He's David Neese. I'm Corey Naito. Brian Cameron could not make it, but hopefully we'll have the three of us back next Tuesday. This has been Flipping the Birds, and go Birds. Have a great evening.
Flipping the bird.